Okay, so in chapter 2, actually, we're going to talk a lot about rates of changes and limits, etc. like that. So the first part of this is a rate of change that we call the average velocity. Average velocity. So let's stop and think a minute about what is a velocity. So in your car, if you're going to measure the velocity, you would say miles per hour. Or if we're out running, you might say feet per second or something like that. So average velocity, or velocity in general, is going to be a change, which we always call delta. So delta means change, in distance divided by the change in time. So some examples of this would be miles per hour, or feet per second, or meters per second, something like that. So it's always going to be the change in distance divided by the change in time. So the first thing we're going to go over with velocity is average velocity. So the average velocity over a time interval is going to be how far my distance changes, or my position, divided by the time. So let's write that down. So average velocity over a time interval. Let's say our time interval here is from T1 to T2. So this might be something like from the first second to the third second, so 1 to 3. So the average velocity over a time interval T1 to T2 is the ratio of the change in position over the change in time. Now, if you're given an equation that tells you the position, so let's say that S of t gives the position, then the average velocity, we actually have a formula for it. It's going to be S of t2 minus S of t1 over t1 minus t, or t2 minus t1. So what did I just write down? If S of t is giving me my position, this says how far did I move, so this is my change in position, divided by the total time difference, so this is my change in time. So that's where we get the average velocity, is the change in position over the change in time. So whenever a problem says calculate the average velocity, you're going to take the change in the position, or the change in the distance, how far did the object move, divided by the change in the time. So, for example, let's say that position is given by, how about S of t is 4t squared minus t. Let's find the average velocity from t equals 2 to t equals 3. So I want the average velocity from t equals 2 to t equals 3. So the average velocity, that's going to be the change in the position divided by the change in time. So what's my change in position? That'll be S of 3 minus S of 2 divided by 3 minus 2. So let's see what happens when I plug in 3. If I plug in 3 to my equation for S of t, I'm going to get 4 times 9. So 4 times 9 is 36. 36 minus 3 is 33. And now let's see, when I plug in 2, I'll get 4 times 4, which is 16. 16 minus 2 is 14 over 1, which gives me 19. So the average velocity from t equals 2 to t equals 3 is 19. Now what are the units on this? Well, the problem didn't tell you what the position is measured in. Let's say the position is measured in feet and t was measured in seconds. The average velocity would be feet per second. So that was the position over time, so feet per second. continuing on with this example, what if the problem said find the average velocity for the first 3 seconds? So if we're trying to find the average velocity over the first 3 seconds, we need to know what's our starting time and what's our ending time. So what's my T1 and what's my T2? Well, the first 3 seconds I'm starting out at 0 and I'm ending with 3. So the average velocity is going to be s of 3 minus s of 0 divided by 3 minus 0. So what is s of 3? Let's go back to our equation. That would be 4 times 9 minus 3, which we did before, so that's 33. S of 0 was 4 times 0 squared minus 0, so 0, divided by 3, which is 11, and we said this was measured in feet per second. So over the first 3 seconds, our average velocity was 11 feet per second. So whenever you're trying to find average velocity, you're going to be given some sort of interval, a starting t and an ending t. So you're always going to be given a t1 and a t2. That's going to be your interval. It might tell you explicitly what these are, or it might give you an interval in interval notation. So it might say something like this. Either way, you're going to have a starting time and an ending time. Plug those into your position. Be careful that you put the second one first. So it always has to be s of t2 minus s of t1, and then divided by t2 minus t1. So this is always going to be your average velocity.